Today we're going on a vacation to Jupiter's moon Io. Io is the fifth moon away from Jupiter and is known as one of the four Galilean satellites, along with Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, that were discovered in 1610 by Galileo. As seen in the diagram, Io is in what's called a resonance orbit, which is just simply a regular gravitational influence between Jupiter and the other moons. This has quite an impact on Io's conditions and its orbit. Io is the fourth largest moon in the solar system and is very similar in size to our moon. The diagram in the top right corner shows a comparison of Io to Earth. You can also see the comparison of Io and our moon's orbit. The gravitational impact of Jupiter's other moons gives Io a very irregular orbit. This orbit causes extreme tidal bulges, however, there is no water on Io, so really it should be called land bulges, and also gives the moon itself a slight elliptical shape. Io is one of the few moons that has an atmosphere, but it is very thin and composed of sulfur dioxide gas. For 2 hours every day, the atmosphere actually collapses. This coincides with when Jupiter blocks out the sun completely to the moon. The temperature drops and the surface is mostly sulfur dioxide frost. As the moon is exposed to the sun, the frost skips the liquid stage and moves straight to a gas, known as sublimation. Io has an iron core and has the least amount of water in the solar system. The most fascinating part of Io is its color. In the top corner, I've indicated what some of the colors represent. Most impressive is that Io is the most volcanically active place in the solar system. 5% of the surface is volcanoes, with over 400 active ones. These volcanoes also shoot sulfur dioxide powerfully into space up to 300 kilometers above the surface. Because it is such a volcanically and geologically active place, almost no craters are visible. The volcanoes on Io are better termed volcanic depressions or lava lakes because they are so wide and usually form more as a valley. These are powered by tidal bulging. Loki is the largest on Io, measuring about 200 kilometers in diameter. On Earth, volcanoes spew lava from the top of a mountain and are powered by heat generated from radioactive decay in the core. In this picture, we see auroras on the top of Jupiter. The moons, but mostly Io, are largely responsible for their presence. Io's orbit interacts with Jupiter's magnetic field. When volcanoes on Io's surface spew ions into space, they get swept into Jupiter's orbit. This also effectively turns Io into an electric generator, known to generate a current up to 3 million amps. If we were to be on the surface of Io, Jupiter would appear about 39 times larger than how the moon looks to us while on the surface of the Earth. Because Io takes the same amount of time to rotate on its axis as it does to orbit around Jupiter, the same side of Io always faces Jupiter. The three biggest challenges we are going to encounter are definitely radiation, as it will be extremely lethal. It will be difficult to determine where to land due to the changing conditions, and we will be subject to some very extreme temperature differences. When thinking about going to Io, maybe one day we could slowly adapt to radiation exposure from low doses. Over time, it's possible we may have to adapt our bodies in order to survive. If we also timed our trip correctly to when Io's tidal bulge is lowest, maybe we would be subject to less extreme effects. But of course, if all else fails, Europa is right next door. It is known as a place that has a potential for life due to deep oceans under the surface, definitely much more water than Io. Ultimately, why is Io an intriguing place to visit? Despite the overwhelming smell, there will never be a dull moment. Io is unique and always changing. The very conditions would be enough to keep you always engaged. Io is interesting. By studying extreme environments, we can understand how to and what kinds of things can survive in these environments. In addition, volcanoes and hydrothermal systems have been associated with life here on Earth. Maybe it's possible the lava lakes have some hidden life. And finally, Io is symbolic. Before Galileo discovered Io, we still believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system, and everything revolved around us. By observing Io orbiting around Jupiter, we now knew we were not the center of the universe. However, Io is probably still one of the most inhospitable environments in the solar system. For now, we shall have to observe its odd beauty from afar.